Yeah, so it's interesting, sort of making some sense of all of that sort of stuff. And billions just
That's people by.
just blur.
Yeah.
Just sounds, people have no real way of interpreting that, right? Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to today's event, which is about English devolution, local growth and the spending review, which is due next week. I have the perfect guest with us today to talk about these issues, Clive Betts. Welcome, Clive.
Thank you very much.
MP since 1992, for a long time for Sheffield Attercliffe and now for Sheffield South East. That's the boundary change. It's the same thing,
yes.
Different name.
Yeah.
But not only have you been an MP since 1992, you were a councillor before that.
I was.
And for a period you were both the deputy leader to David Blunkett, Lord Blunkett, and then you took on the leadership when David left, is that right?
That's right.
Until you became an MP. So you've been in and around Sheffield politics and national politics for quite a long time.
50 years next year.
Very, and still going strong.
Well, I hope so.
I
yes.
think you are. No, definitely. And I think, all of that is particularly relevant because you play a huge role on the local as well as on the national. But particularly for today, you were chair of the select committee, CLG select committee, levelling up select committee, different names, but the same sort of area of focus from 2010 until 24. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
And now you're on the Public Accounts Committee and the occasional guest appearance on the CLG committee.
I'm deputy chair of the Public Accounts.
Right.
So, yeah.
So a long way of saying, as we all know, everybody will know, Clive, a particularly knowledgeable and engaged politician, an analyst, interrogator, scrutineer, thorn in the side of governments of all persuasions, I think is the way you
I hope
describe
so. That's part of the job.
But if you're upsetting everyone,
Yeah.
I think you're on safe ground. Right? So, and what we're going to try and do, we'll take questions and answers. So again, those of you that are joining and listening, as always, questions into we're using the Q&A function. I'll try to throw them into Clive as we're going along. There's lots that we want to talk to Clive about. I think we want to get a sense, initially, Clive, as to where you think now the devolution debate has got to, as a sort of moment in time. I think it's quite a moment in time, newish government, next wave of devolution, happening as we speak, existing devolution deepening, not least with the decision announcement today on city region transport, and then think about the next phasing of that. And I think weaving through all of that, because I know you've been particularly engaged in this, is thinking about how local authorities and the state of local authorities sort of inform that sort of discussion. So big question, I suppose, big picture first. When you think back to the devolution agenda of the last decade or so, where do you think we've kind of got to now? How would you sort of sum it up?
I think it has moved forward.
Yep.
We have a devolution agenda.
Yeah.
You come back to 2010, there really wasn't very much of one. So to be fair, it's across governments, and I give credit to Greg Clark when he was the minister of the Conservative government and the coalition government for pushing this agenda with a lot of resistance from the Treasury, I think, at the time. And that's why you got very incremental change. But I think Greg got the need for a more strategic level of government, the combined authority.
Yeah.
He promoted that. I think he got the message that our cities were underperforming in particular compared with continental cities. And how could you bring them to the heart of a bigger authority to drive growth, whether it be employment growth, housing growth and transport. I think he got that, and I think we have moved on since then.
Yeah.
The six old metropolitan combined authorities are alive and running and developing.
Yeah.
They're getting this single budget, which is now for Greater Manchester and the West Midlands, and will come out to the other four of the established combined authorities next year. So that is a significant move forward. We should be saying, well done. We have moved the agenda.
Yeah.
Have we moved it far enough? Or we'll probably go into those details.
Yeah, we'll get into the,
but at least I think and also I think there's a commitment at the top. Certainly I see this Labour government having a commitment at the top to devolution that wasn't there previously. And I've sat in the same room as Keir Starmer, and I was a bit sceptical at first. Keir has no real background in local government. Does he get it? He just said, we can't deliver what we want as a government from the centre. We have to do it down at local level with local communities and local politicians engaged in the process. Yeah. And I think he really believes that.
Yeah. And you're a politician, an MP, as well as sort of been playing on the national role. We'll get onto the sort of expansion bit of the devolution agenda, get your thoughts on that, because as I say, I think we're at a moment where we've had some, we're going to have quite a lot more in the next 12 months, and then certainly more again as we go through the Parliament. But in terms of the sort of the doorstep question, which is, what has devolution ever done? What's it done for us so far? When you think about how you respond to that, both nationally, but then I suppose in the South Yorkshire context, what are the kind of things that you would typically point to or suggest you can see that improvements are happening or things are changing for the better?
Yes, I think it's started a process. I think we've had a real challenge, particularly in areas outside London, in terms of resources. Transport for London has done a pretty incredible job, I think. I know people complain about this, that and the other with bus services not going here or trains not running there, but by and large it works pretty well for a very complicated system. We've never had the resources, we've never had the ability to join things up. We've run our bus services on the basis of where private companies want to choose the routes and how often to run them. Well, you can't run a public service on the basis of where private companies decide to make profits. It just doesn't work. So that change is significant. I think move towards franchising. Greater Manchester's done it.
West Yorkshire underway, South Yorkshire underway.
Merseyside. So we are moving in the right direction. I think that's going to be a big change. It's going to need resources. You can't run a better service with less money. I think we've learnt that one. So there is an issue around there. But in principle, it's moving forward, trying to develop light rail. I think is a change over the years. That's a really important part of what local areas can deliver. But there are still challenges, and I start to see now, certainly in South Yorkshire, a join up of housing strategy and building. Credit to Homes England. They began in Sheffield, but they rolled it out to South Yorkshire, looking at the housing market and how we can deliver housing growth over a period of time. Not seeing their role as Homes England. Can we approve that grant for that site or that grant for that site? But how we can sit down and develop a strategy and put our funding to make it work. That I think is a change as well.
And how do you think, the mayors individually and I suppose collectively, how do you think they've informed and influenced sort of national politics or the national debate around the nature and shape of the economy? Because they've individually, but certainly collectively, they've become important spokespersons for not only for their area, but for general bigger points about how the economy functions, how it works for more places than simply.
I think it's beginning.
Right.
I think they will probably accept if you push them and say, what have you achieved? They're working out how to be most effective. Do they do it by two areas linking together? I think we've seen some possibilities of the rail line between Liverpool and Manchester. The two mayors have got together and pushed for that. Or is it more of mayors joining together across the north to push a case for the north as a need for more growth there to increase the growth levels of the whole country? I think they're working through that. But at least I think there is a recognition that government does listen to their voice now, which I think is quite important.
So, and we'll come on to this. So, we've had the Metro Mayors for a while, for a good while in some respects now. Some of them into their third term. We're about to get another wave, the next 6, I think, on the devolution priority programme, which are outside of the sort of, as you say, some of the metropolitan county areas, and then further rounds again. What do you think about, where are you on that? Good move, painful, the right kind of thing? What do you think?
I'm open to be persuaded. I think, look, basically, when we began with the 6 old metropolitan areas, I think the focus very much was on the need to increase the growth in our cities. You look at our cities in this country, they perform less well than the national average in terms of the GDP.
They do.
That is not true of virtually any other country in continental Europe.
Very true.
And that's the fundamental problem. So if you look, it was to make sure that the Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, Leeds, Sheffield, Birmingham were all starting to pull their weight in the national growth agenda. I'm not sure that's the case in most of the areas that are now being developed. When Greg Clark did this, he had a very clear view of what a combined authority should be. And it was basically a travel to work area, a jobs market area, a housing market area, a growth area. That sort of got lost along the way, and what we're seeing now, it's a bit the case in South Yorkshire, I have to say as well. We had an argument over boundaries, which I think the rational people lost, as I would say. And you've gone back now simply to sticking together historical county boundaries. Those boundaries are only there because someone drew a line on a map because of somebody had an argument over one noble against another centuries ago. It's not necessarily the best way to plan rationally for the future.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because, as you say, they do seem to continue to to be at the forefront of much of the conversation about existing boundaries, and therefore we have to work within them.
It's the easy thing to do, isn't it? And I know what happens if you try and change. If you stick 2 counties together, people sort of get on with it. If you try and change one of those counties, there'll be petitions, demonstrations. You're destroying our heritage. This is where we've always been. I know when they tried to bring some of Sheffield into Derbyshire into the Sheffield City region. There were posters that Sheffield takeover. That's where it was.
I agree.
And I suppose politically, you have to take account of people's views. Does it deliver the best outcome? Probably not.
Yeah, and you have to accept that there's a trade-off between those two things. I suppose that touches on a little bit. Interested in your thoughts, not least because of as you say, we've had devolution, for a decade or so now, spanning different administrations, and as you say, sometimes it was very prominent under Greg and Osborne as then Chancellor. It waned a little bit under Theresa May. Came back under Boris Johnson, and then waned again under Sunak, and has come back, albeit in a slightly different way now under Labour. Can you see discernible differences between how you think Labour thinks about this issue relative to iterations of the past? They're not all the same iteration, but can you see a difference if you were describing the Labour's sort of mindset on devolution? Because they are the ones that are now trying to fill the map.
Yeah, there are differences. I think there's some real beneficial changes.
Right.
I'm not just saying that because it's Labour on because I give him credit to Greg Clark for what he did. And I think he was constrained by the Treasury. They wanted to see every little change put in place before another change happened. It was very incremental for that reason. Boris was fixated on levelling up, which meant how could his government give grants out to various areas, which gave a photo opportunity to ministers to claim credit for whatever happened. That's no way. And I think there's, I think Michael Gove eventually got that as well, that you can't run devolution with lots of different pots of money and saying to local authorities, here you are, there's 30 different grants here, try and join them up. And by the way, you just spent hours and hours and millions of pounds of resources bidding for grants you didn't get. That's no way to proceed. So I think now we've got a more sensible approach, which is about giving resources to a local authority and saying to them, look, we've got certain objectives that you want you to meet, certain growth agendas, certain improvements, but it's up to you how you deliver them. So I think that's a different mindset. Hopefully it works out, because there's always a temptation for ministers to dive in and intervene. Look, MPs in the House of Commons are the worst at it. I always say, you get heavy snowfall during the winter, and MPs are jumping up and saying, Minister, what are you going to do about the fact that the cul-de-sac in my constituency hasn't been gritted? Well, come on. I want ministers to start getting up saying, it's not our responsibility, go and see the mayor, go and see the council leader, that's where responsibility is.
That would be a milestone moment. When we actually hear them say that, and know that they're not just passing the blame. I think that would be a milestone moment for knowing that we've devolved some. Just on, you talked about one of the things, observable big things that will make a material difference is the transport element, particularly bus franchising in the first instance, and then mass transit and rail, etc., being rolled into that. I think I completely agree with you on that. I think that's a big ticket thing. The other one you mentioned, which I suppose is a little bit more behind the scenes, or you just touched on it then, is this sort of integrated funded settlements, initially for GM, and for West Mids, but then being rolled out to some of the other places. In your mind, do you think that is quite a big moment in a sense of, or has the potential to be quite a big moment? And why is
that's
that?
a better way of expressing it. The potential is there because it gives that freedom at local level to pick out what are deemed to be local priorities and how best to deliver the agenda at local level. Yes, of course. Is there enough money to make it work? That's going to be a big question. I just mentioned light rail. I mean, I'm a real committed fan of light rail. I think in the modern age where we are trying to move people around congested urban areas, I remember talking to Brian Souter. Remember him? Stagecoach boss, founder. Not necessarily a political fan of Brian's, but he said to me, there are people who get on a tram who would never get on a bus. And I think persuading people, and that's actually quite true at the minute. I go around my holidays, I like actually going around cities in continental Europe. Virtually everyone has got an integrated transport system based on light rail. You go around this country, we're still scratching the surface. And the bits of money are welcome in the spending review, but they are still bits of money towards developing a comprehensive system. Other countries have been doing it for years. We've got catching up to do. Have we got enough money to do real catching up? I think that's the question.
Yeah, quite. It's a good point on definitely on that. And so, as I said when I was introducing you, you are a scrutinizer and a keen observer of the detail of what the government does, as well as the headlines. Like on the integrated settlements, as they roll out, what will you with your PAC hat on, or with your your observer of government hat on, and involved in South Yorkshire, what will you be looking for us to know, and for you to be actually, this is substantive, this is genuine responsibility being devolved, where they can make the decisions sometimes at odds with what maybe government would ideally want them to do? What will you be looking for in that? You've talked a little bit about the quantum of money. I think that's fair and a big question, but are there other things you'll be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think are we actually going to grow the local economy? That seems absolutely key. Are we going to create more jobs, better paid jobs? Because one of the challenges for northern areas is not just unemployment levels, it's the fact that people who are in work earn less than they do in the more affluent parts of the south of the country. That's challenges. So can we really grow our economies? Does it fit into the national industrial strategy? How does that work with local development with the mayors? We've got big announcements coming about the industrial strategy, about small nuclear reactors, which I'm something very interested in, the potential for areas like South Yorkshire. So how do what the mayor's doing fit into that? And is it going to grow the economy, create better paid jobs, and then of course deliver better homes as well? And how is transport going to link that up so people can get to the jobs? Because I think one of the challenges, Andrew, I always find, is that there's still a feeling in this country, everything goes to the cities, within the north. We're leaving the small towns behind. Can we really deliver for small towns the sort of really high quality, high tech jobs that many people there need? Or can we deliver them in the cities and provide better transport to get people from the towns to the cities? It's those sorts of link-ups I think the mayors have got to address.
And trying to think through that and think about how the economy is working, and therefore where activity is wanted to be or needing to be, and then thinking about how you might connect people to the jobs as well as jobs to the to the people. Let's sort of wrap up the first, which is a sort of an up to present day perspective. One of the things you've been brilliant on through your time at the CLG Select Committee, and then I know you're carrying it on now. You have a live inquiry with a report imminent on local government and local government funding particularly. It's undoubtable and clearly obvious in the numbers, never mind anything else, that, to say it politely, the last decade and a half has been quite a tough time for local government. So say a little bit about, just give a sort of sense as to how you think about the scale of that, tough time, that austerity period. But then I suppose there's a question about, local government is vital component of the devolution agenda, the MCA agenda. And, I've heard you say before about, building foundations on sand is not good. And that's what we're, effectively doing. So just give us your sense as to what the austerity period is and has done. And then how do you think that's affected the progress on devolution to date? And then we'll think about how we need to maybe address both of those.
I think it's had a potentially big impact. Local governments have bigger cuts than any other part of the public sector since 2010. That's the reality. Particularly during the coalition period. It began when Eric Pickles basically made his grand gesture to make local government the beginning of the cuts process. And it stabilised a bit since, but only stabilised at a lower level. And I think what it's done, given that local councils have faced not merely those cuts, but increasing demand for services that they can't control. Care of the elderly, send, looked after children, homelessness, all those issues are ones that the local authorities can't control. So they've got the demand coming through the door at one end and less money to pay for it. What's actually happened, therefore, I think is two things that are really very important. One is that local authorities have basically hollowed out their core, their policy functions, their research functions, their project delivery functions. So I think they're much less able now to respond to new challenges in different ways. I think that's true of many authorities. They struggle. Secondly, because the strategic, because the statutory responsibilities around care and homelessness, etc., have to take priority, the rest of the services have been really stripped out even more. So it's the refuse collection, the street cleaning, the parks, the libraries,
planning departments,
housing
departments,
those things. The things that actually affect people's daily lives. So people say to you, and I think this is a real problem, this, for the democratic process. People say, I'll go and vote. I vote and I get worse services and I pay 5% more council tax every year. Where's my council tax go? And people really don't understand the pressures of care and homelessness and look after children and special education. They don't get, why should they get it? All they get is they're paying more and they're getting less. And I think that's a real challenge for local democracy if you're going to encourage people to engage in that process. So,
and there's no obvious way, as you say, within the current system, there's no obvious way for them to be able to manage that. I'm always struck when go to big places and small is part of the work that we do. The sort of the challenges of the daily hygiene agenda, keeping the place looking clean and safe, and that is just never ending, but really becoming increasingly problematic. Over and above then some of the other things that you might want places to be doing, but just the daily hygiene stuff is tough.
Well, it is. We just talked about the real possibilities. Bus services are important. They get improved. People say, we see what's happening. But when we talk about delivering jobs and building more homes for the future, sometimes it causes problems more than the others. Building on sites people don't want to see built on. Or small modular reactors are creating jobs for the future. They are the future. The here and now is a challenge for people who are struggling in their lives anyway, trying to make their household budgets balance and find these public services getting cut while they're having to pay more for them. So I think that's a real difficulty, because that's the here and now, and that's where the scepticism sometimes about politics comes.
And the sort of the tough period that they've gone through and the implications of that tough period in terms of essentially now what they do, how do you think that's affected the devolution agenda? Has it slowed it? Has it undermined it? Has it pushed it in different directions? How do you think that sort of local government challenge sort of feeds into then the devolution agenda that we've seen over the last decade?
Maybe in two ways. Maybe nationally politicians think, well, we've got all these small authorities, we're sticking together, we'll get efficiencies. Now there may be a bit of truth in that. I'm not sure exactly how much truth and how much saving you're going to make. You're certainly going to cause some costs initially, which I'm not sure have been totally realised. You can't, reorganise substantially and change the whole basis and put three authorities together and make one and assume no costs are going to be incurred. So I think there's issues around there. And whether, there probably is a need for some reform and some change. But maybe there's a feeling, well, yeah, costs in local governments are really been going up, which they have through no fault of local authorities. Therefore, we can actually make some savings. I'm not sure that's totally true.
And do you think it's affected the sort of capacity of the MCAs then to make real, what they want to achieve, or what the mayors want to achieve? The mayors are, as you say, are all about, not all about, but mostly about economic growth, investment, development, expansion, etc. Transport, housing, commercial. Obviously, some of that, not all of that. Local authorities themselves have to be making decisions about where to enable that, where to support that through the planning system. And as you say, parts of the system have been under attack because of other conditions.
It's often those service sectors that have gone because they're not the front line, they're not immediate, they're not having to be delivered. It's not that you've got an elderly person who needs a care home, you've got to fund it. Yeah. It's slightly different to someone saying, well, we need to develop a strategy for creating more jobs in that area. It's not quite the same immediate pressure. So absolutely right, yes. Yeah. And on buses, part of the mayor's I've seen South Yorkshire, I did a review for the last mayor on local bus services, and one thing was very evident. The current mayor's position in terms of franchising has been affected by years and years of cuts, because the councils there, the individual councils who fund the combined authority, thought, okay, we can save some money on buses each year. Now, they were under pressure on other services, of course they were, and bus services, like other things, were one of the areas which received cuts. So, I think passenger miles fell by about half over a period of the Conservative government. Now, that's a massive reduction. You stripped out, for many areas, completely their bus services. Others are hardly worth the effort of going to it, because you have to bus once every 2 hours, once every hour, no buses in the evening. So it's a really low base now, the existing mayor is starting from.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I think, again, you talked earlier on about, I think you referenced, TfL, for example, and the GM experience on the B network. What that tells us is, yes, you need to have the money available to deliver, to run these services or develop these services, take them back under control. But you need institutional capacity and capability in order to, to make the decisions, to actually run the system. And you need to have that. And building that up is not easy, right? So there's going to be a process where some of that capacity needs to be reintroduced and built up again.
The bus network itself is stripped there, but also the passenger transport executive, as it was in Sheffield, hadn't anywhere near the capacity. The mayor's trying to build that back. I look at it, but have they got the capacity really to sit down and plan all the bus routes? Because the public, now that's one of the problems about managing expectations. We've been saying for years to the public, this bus service is awful because the private companies make the cuts.
Now
we're saying it's coming back to public control. They expect their bus services to improve, and the bus service that was cut 5 years ago to be reinstated. So there's a lot of expectation.
An interesting one around that. And last thought on where we are, not so much detail because we'll get into it. So, as I've said, you're literally running inquiries at the minute on both the Select Committee, CLG, and in PAC on local government funding and the sort of situation and how that affects and interacts with devolution. Do you have a sense, what's your sense as to the incoming Labour government? Do they get it? Do they understand the depths of where we've got to, and therefore what might need to happen? We'll get into what might need to happen in a second, but just an appreciation of the problem and the current position. What's your take? I mean, you've scrutinised them, you've interviewed them, you've interrogated them. What's your sense?
I think Jim McMahon gets it. What he can do about it, of course, is not necessarily totally in his hands. But I think he understands it. I mean, he's a long-term local government politician. He's been a council leader. He's been leader of the LGA. So he understands it. Now, I'm sure he's there fighting for local government very hard. Do the civil service get it? I'm not sure. I mean, it was very interesting because currently, within 2 inquiries, I was a guest on the HCLG Select Committee inquiry where Jim McMahon, the Minister, came along. I also am Deputy Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and we've done an inquiry where the civil servants came along to answer our questions there about local government finance. Did I come out of that convinced that they understood it? No. So, we're going to, I won't say any more because we're about to produce a report.
No, of course.
Produce a report on that.
Yeah.
What I can say is my personal observations is I wasn't convinced. Now, whether they were not convinced and were not saying any more than they could, or were they really convinced and they got it wrong, I don't know.
Yeah, I happened to be in the room on that inquiry when you were asking Jim the tough questions, and I could tell by your reaction that you were that your reaction was, or your decision or reflection was exactly that. So I think it'll be an interesting time. But that leads us on to spending review next week, 11th of June, a week today. From a sort of devolution, let's do devolution first. Again, what will you be looking for in the spending review to give the right signals, the right sentiment that devolution is serious and is going to progress over the next spending review?
Well, I think it isn't just spending; it's about powers as well. I'll put it together. It's about powers, spending in terms of what government gives, and also the ability to raise money at local level.
Yeah,
there's those three elements.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see a lot more. The powers, all right, ability to run single pot budgets at the combined authority level. I'm not sure we'll see anything more about powers for local governments. And one of my slight criticisms, certainly scepticism about the devolution agenda is what is actually happening in terms of more powers to individual councils as opposed to combined authorities. Not seeing a great deal at present. A lot more could be done. So I don't think we're going to see anything on education. I'm still thinking, councils have not got a proper overall ability to grasp education in their area because it's so fragmented, the system. No sign that's going to change, I think. So and then ability to raise, well, we don't know what spending review will give in terms of quantum. I think there will be some changes that are good, as already been signalled, about multi-year settlements, about a redistribution of the money that exists on a more up-to-date formula, not having figures going back 20 years and which to base settlements on, which is nonsense. So they're right. But if it's, I'll just say one thing very provocative now, if I might.
Of course you can.
If it's a nonsense to base government allocations on figures that are 20 years old, why are we basing council tax on figures that are over 30 years old?
No, well, let's just hold on. I definitely want to explore, because I suppose we'll get onto that question broadly defined and then specifics within in a second. But I just wanted to get your thought on, this is I guess more related to local government, which is fine, which is what is the promise of and the value of multi-year settlements, in a sense trying to move away from incremental, 12-month on, 12-month, rolling 12 months, or even just static 12 months. What's the sort of size of the prize on multi-year settlements? And what's your sort of sense?
It helps, but it doesn't solve.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, if you haven't got enough money, however many years settlement you have, you still got But I think it does help. I think it means that perhaps you can look a bit ahead and think, well, if I make that fundamental change, which will cost me some money now, over 2 or 3 years, I can save it. I think it helps in that process. Yeah.
Okay. We're getting some questions in, which I'll throw in as we go along. So we'll have. But before I start throwing in some of the questions, we have to address the fiscal question, as it were, fiscal devolution question. I suppose, very bluntly, Clive, are we ever going to get fiscal? Give me some reason to be optimistic about fiscal devolution, because in the inquiry that you were just referring to, the minister was asked council tax reform, even just updated to current times, even if you do very little else. And my sense, maybe I misheard, was a flat no. We are definitely not doing council tax reform in this parliament. That's what I heard. I don't know if you've heard
I heard the same. I heard the officials say the same.
So are we ever going to get fiscal devo?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed because clearly the current system is broken. I mean, everyone can see it is. We talk about devolution. and local authorities in the UK have been part of one of the most centralised systems in Western Europe. That isn't just about powers, it is about ability to raise money. You go to any of the local authorities in continental Europe, they will have forms of taxation that they can use, that they can control themselves. Now, even the council tax, which is the local tax, is limited by, say, a valuation which is based on something that's 25 years old now. You've got bans that houses are put into, which are fixed nationally. You can't increase the council tax by more than a set amount without a referendum. How many more restrictions do you want on the local tax? And you've got business rates which local authorities have no say. You mentioned when I became a councillor back 50 years ago, the councils control business rates. And as well as domestic rates, and could freely do what they wanted with them.
But do you think that's a problem? Do you think the government stroke Treasury, they think that if we give local authorities some of those capabilities again, they'll go bananas. They'll go back to the days of raising council tax by enormous amounts and all that. Is there a worry on that? Do you think?
Yes,
I don't think it's founded, but.
I think it is, and it's. There's two things. One, do we really give them the power to put tax? Then they come all six, and we will get blamed as a government for it. Yeah, it's partly true because MPs stand up and attack the government for increasing the council tax. Yeah. So, but then secondly, is that there's an issue. If you can change taxes and how taxes are collected and who pays them. At a time when, if you like, the ship is rising, then and there's more resources around, then all right, some people pay a bit less, others pay the same. Yeah. But a net zero game, if there's more money, you can deliver it. Yeah. If it is net zero in terms of total amount of money, and if you've got to give people a reduction in their tax, other people have got to pay more. Yeah. The simple principle. Those who get to pay less, thank you, and forget about it. Those who get to pay more, never forgive you for the next 10 years. So it's that I think ministers are really frightened about reforming the bans on council tax and revaluations because of all the losers, and there will be losers unless you've got total more money to cushion the effect on the losers.
And do you think local government broadly defined, not individual authorities, but local government broadly defined, is as strong as advocate for council tax reform, fiscal devolution, as say you and I are? I'm never sure that when behind the scenes where the local government is such a big fan for some of the reasons that you've just alluded to.
I think it varies.
Right.
I think some parts of the country are. Yeah. Other parts of the country say, well, what's in it for us? Because look, the reality is that council tax is regressive currently between households in an area. Michael Gove accepted that. Yeah, it was regressive because the richer households proportionally don't pay as much as the poorer households. But it's also regressive in terms of distribution across the country. Put the council tax at 1%, where you deliver a lot less money in Barnsley than Buckinghamshire, for example. It's just a very unfair system. Therefore, to give more ability to raise council tax in the poorer areas isn't necessarily a great benefit for them. So some of those areas will be very ambivalent about having more power over council tax. Mm-hmm. What they want is more money centrally to be distributed differently. Yeah. So it's how you put those two together. I mean, one argument that has been put forward is that central government should give local government a guaranteed amount of the national revenues. Now that's what some of the Scandinavian countries do.
That's true. That's exactly what they do.
And so that will be another way of dealing with it. Put your two together, maybe national guarantee and some form of reformed local taxation.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And the guarantee is a sort of banded that you'll never go, a certain amount below a certain, and then essentially if you grow your economy, get more tax in as a result of that through the decisions, then you get to keep some of that. Yeah, I think that's pretty. There's elements of the new homes bonus, the local authority business growth incentive scheme, if you remember that, LAGB or whatever it was.
Business rates
retention. There's sort of attempts to try.
Go and ask any council to explain that. I'm sorry, or any MP for that matter. it's so complicated.
It's complex,
That's one of the problems.
Yeah.
If it's that complicated
Yeah.
that even council officers and councillors can't explain it, what chance has the public got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and on the fiscal thing, would you, in your mind, let's say it did begin to happen, would you see, for example, it's not perfect, but having some of the powers, let's say, available to the Scottish Government as becoming appropriate and applicable? They've got income tax, banding, variations, etc. They can introduce new taxes to varying degrees. Actually, we'll come back and ask you a question on tourism taxes, because the mayors were in the press yesterday advocating for the ability to introduce a tourism tax, which Edinburgh is now doing through Holyrood changes. But just in terms of, is that, would you go as far as that, or not, in terms of the kind of Scottish?
Well,
example?
the tourism tax is an incremental change, and it's.
But symbolic, if we got it.
I think the government sort of indicated they might be prepared to do that,
right.
But it only affects some areas, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course.
But let's do it. Let's at least start to move to give that sort of freedom. I think beginning to relax restrictions on fees and charges.
Yeah.
Why on earth is a minister in Whitehall deciding, how much the fees charged by an environmental health officer in Huddersfield should bring in? I mean, it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think Angela Rayner has said that as part of the devolution agenda. So hopefully we can do those things. They are a bit symbolic. At least trusting authorities to get those things right, if nothing else. Income tax is a bigger one. I mean, the Treasury run a mile on that.
Quite.
Absolutely run a mile.
They would.
We probably ought to at least give some consideration to it.
And I mean, is it a fight that we need to continue to make, even if we're uncertain of the outcome? We need to continue to, to find ways to raise this issue and raise the issues and the implications of not being able to do it, and to continue to make those arguments.
Yes, and I think it's political as well. Michael Gove said council tax is regressive. Should a Labour government be banking on a regressive tax to be the one tax that councils can raise, and now actually funding more than half of local government spending? I mean, it just doesn't seem comfortable for me for a Labour government to be in that position.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing we could do, and there's still resistance to this, is say, okay, we can do some incremental changes, the tourism tax and fees and charges, and multi-year settlements. Should we now at least sit down and for the long term have a comprehensive look? I know Royal Commissions are bad around, but at least a proper inquiry into local government finance and what the future should look like. No restrictions on it, no direction as to what it can't do, but just sit down and look for the future. And try and get some cross-party agreement. Maybe we can't. And it's like social care. We've been bandying this around for years on cross-party agreements, but we did it on pensions. Private pensions are a big issue. But we did it. The last Labour government did it and reached a settlement, which the Conservative coalition governments by and large stuck to. So you can do it.
You can do it. Would you? I mean, I know you've said that. What's your sense as to, is that a possibility, do you think, over the next sort of period of in this Parliament, I guess, a sort of a query and inquiry into what we want local government to do? Because that's going back to your earlier point. Same with the MCAs. There's a fundamental question: is what is it that we want these institutions to do,
and then how are we going to pay for it,
and how do we pay for it? Because what they're currently doing is not what people often perceive them to be doing, but that's in part just because of the funding pressures that have been put on them.
I would hope that might be the case. We can do it. All right, it's not that you do nothing in between. We can talk about the particulars and the problems and the challenges. You can, if you sort out the funding of social care, you take an awful lot of pressure off councils. You would, and people would then start to see their council tax paying for things that they really understand. I'm not against taking responsibility away from local government, but certainly another funding stream coming in, which there'd be various ways of moving that in the past. But getting agreements on those things could be developed at the same time. But then, step back and look.
And look at that. We've had several sort of questions coming back on the role of the MCAs. Clive, particularly, I think. Well, let's think about the ones that are currently around, the metro orientated ones, because they've been around longest. That's where the capacity is at its greatest, although varied. Quite a few questions on the sort of progression of that, and picking up your point, which is it's not just about money that they get directly to spend, but actually I wonder what your thoughts are around seeing them have a much bigger role and influence on the totality of public spend that happens in a given place. Because in South Yorkshire there's going to be quite a lot of public money that's going in, some of it direct responsibility of the MCA, but an awful lot of it through other means of the public sector. Would you want to see them become more of a convener, of an influencer on that broader public expenditure debate and discussion?
I think the idea of total place spending has been around for some time.
Good idea, right?
Yeah, it is, because actually most public spending does not go through the MCA and the council. It goes through health, it goes to Department of Work and Pensions and other bodies. So yes, without spending more money, could we get that better joined up at local level? I'm sure we could.
Yeah.
The health service is in constant state of flux. Integrated care boards, overseas spending, they've been shrunk in size, but they still commission health funding in their areas. To whom are they accountable? Really, I mean, it's in the end they're accountable to the Secretary of State. But it's really a false accountability. The idea that West Streeting is sat in his office today, looking at some GP practice in Liverpool and saying, well, how can we meet the challenges there, is a nonsense.
Yeah.
And that, I think, can we get that move so that there can be a better oversight at local level, I think is a big challenge.
And would you see sort of the MCAs not controlling all of that, but would you envisage them becoming, as I say, the sort of convener, the interlocutor, the bringer together of these different entities, institutions, organisations to try and figure that out? You see that a little bit of that happening.
It's not going to run local hospitals, but you can see the overall spending and profile of spending and delivery of objectives. I mean, something they should be dealing with, and West Streeting has raised the issue of transferring more resources into primary care, looking at equalities issues, look at the enormous disparity in life expectancy. 10 years difference across Sheffield in life expectancy. That's true of many cities. So should the MCA have an overview like that, and then it can link that into jobs and work and training, and all the other public health issues that individual council are responsible for? Yes, I think it could and can. And I think government is indicating it wants to see a potential move there. But it's talking at this stage about having someone from the MCA on the local integrated care board. Yeah, that's a token.
Yeah,
it needs to go further than that.
That's not enough. Yeah. I think one of the other questions, or several other questions that have come in on that sort of related issue, particularly on on issues about welfare bill management, particularly helping people, that are currently on welfare but back into work, which is obviously one of the central elements that the MCAs and local authorities are trying to do. They call it different things, but essentially trying to provide people with some of the skills, confidence, capabilities to go back into the labour market, which obviously has benefits to the welfare bill, but some of those benefits are not retained locally, which then affects the incentives and the way that these programmes work. Is kind of bringing some of that together as well. Similarly on health, you can see a similar argument, right?
If you had one of the challenges for the MCAs of removing disadvantage and inequalities, I think they could do a lot of joining up, because it's about access to jobs, it's about helping people back to work. We know that unemployment is higher in the most disadvantaged areas. We know that wage levels are lower. We know that lots of other things like the public health service, pollution levels are higher in those areas, affects health. We know that kids who go to see dentists are likely to go with far more examples of dental decay at the age of 5 in poorer areas. So how you work the whole system to address those sorts of challenges, I think is something the MCAs could be given an oversight over.
Yeah. And then a couple of other questions in slightly different ways, actually again picks up on what you were just saying and something you talked about earlier on. One sort of question is about the capability and capacity of MCAs and local government more generally to do all of this sort of stuff, particularly given the financial conditions. So interested in your thought on where you think we are currently on capacity, but then if we want them to do more, that capacity needs to be developed and expanded. How we might, what do we need in order to do that? And then I've got another question on come through on expectation management. But do that first one. Are you worried that what we want from our MCAs and from local government, the capacity constraint is a problem? How do we overcome it?
Absolutely. I mean, like the rest of local government, it's been hollowed out, and to some extent, the MCA may have drawn from local government. I think probably Greater Manchester is the best example because they've been working collectively together for some time. The councils, before the formality of the combined authority was established, they've been longer as a combined authority than South Yorkshire or West Yorkshire, so they've had more chance to do that, and it takes time to build them. I think the idea of single pot and multi-year settlements helps, because if they're going out to build capacity, they've got to recruit more people, skilled people, qualified people, to go and encourage people to come in, to say, well, actually, we know that we've got this funding now for the next 3 years. It's quite an important lever to attract people, but it's going to take time. I mentioned buses, but it certainly true in the economic development area. Are the skills there now? No. Do they recognise they haven't got the skills? I think they're increasingly recognising that, and there has to be some really good recruitment in the next few years.
And like another sort of strand of questions, which is about, we talked about lots of things, I think, actually, but then someone's saying, well, should MCAs have a bigger role in tackling child poverty? Should they have a bigger role in tackling net zero? Should they have a bigger role in insert whatever the issue is that people are worried about? So that's about expectation management, right? I mean, in the sense, is there a worry that the expectation of what the MCAs can achieve will just grow and grow and grow, and ultimately we'll be disappointed in a period of time, because these things,
yes, possibly so. So we may have to be realistic, but again, it's about funding. If government really wants some of these big issues addressing, then the funding has to be there. But perhaps what we are doing currently is spending money from national government departments in a disparate way, without joining it up at local level. I mean, there isn't really a join up to tackle inequality, whether it be employment inequality, health inequality, whatever the issues are, housing inequality at a local level. And I think you can do it better at local level than you can at national level.
And
without necessarily having more money,
go on.
You just got to make sure the money's down at local level. It can be better spent.
Quite. People picking up on those points. Again, another set of questions around coming back to the spending review, and I think today's announcement on city region transport is a kind of example where part of the big picture, I think, on the spending review will be the story on capital investment will be pretty good. I think the adjustments that Chancellor made to the fiscal rules back in the autumn, give her quite a bit of capital headroom. And there'll be good stories, and the story today about city region transport is a good example of that. We'll probably see a bit more over the next week or so. Much tougher story on revenue. Are you worried? Are you worried about that? Is that something that you'll be keeping an eye on when you think about when you look at the detail of the spending review?
Let's deal with the two issues. Capital, absolutely great. Look, we've underinvested in capital historically in this country, and it's partly again a political issue. If you promise someone a big new capital investment which will come on stream in 10 years' time, the next election is 5 years away. So there's always a focus on the here and now. But so I think it's good that we're getting that, and it's good the Treasury are changing apparently their assessments of the value of capital investment. I mean, I always remember when we were trying to get some money into brownfield development in my constituency, and then I worked out the way it was evaluated, the benefits of that investment were according to the uplift in land values. Well, if you've got a brownfield site in Sheffield or a greenfield site in Surrey, and you spend the same amount of money on both, which is going to have the biggest uplift in land value? Well, it's pretty obvious. We were asking the wrong question and getting the wrong answer.
So in that example, Clive, what question should we ask? Because you're right in the sense that that approach gives you that answer, but I think you're also right in that what you're really saying is we've asked the wrong question. The system has given you the answer to the question we've asked, but we should have asked a different question. What's the question?
Well, the question I think is, and it's more difficult to evaluate,
Yeah.
what is that doing for job opportunities,
Yeah.
for local growth, for improving the environment,
Yeah.
and the living standards of people in more deprived areas?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if you are uplifting someone in a deprived area by 10%, it's actually more beneficial than uplifting someone in an affluent area by 10%.
And it connects to your bigger points you started on, which is, a recognition that, for example, bringing brownfield land back into productive use in and around, let's say, this, Sheffield and the South Yorks region connects to the broader agenda about broad-based national growth.
Absolutely.
And that's what the government wants, right? So there's a connection of the strategy through to the
you
delivery.
Can't grow the whole economy to a higher level if you just grow part of it. And that's the problem. That's what we've been doing. We've been growing the southeast and the pressure on the southeast and the increasing costs and values in the southeast, and yet you've got all this potential in the north that's been under-tapped and underutilised.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, and we're nearly out of time, Clive. I mean, the hour has flown by. I could talk to you for hours more. Just on on your reflections. Just sort of final. I mean, big questions, I suppose, but final sort of reflections on what next? Where are we? What will you be wanting? What's your ambition, I suppose, for the for the next period? Or, maybe the remaining bit of the remaining part of this particular government as a long-standing Labour MP, but also a long-standing MP that plays at the local and the national. What is it that what's your ambition, your hope for the next few years?
Oh, that we can actually get high-quality development, high-quality jobs. In the northern areas, particularly the cities, because that's where the growth's going to come, that we can deal with the brownfield degradation that we've got, to regenerate those areas, to provide new homes for people in areas which are desperately short of them. I think they're big challenges, and then a properly integrated transport system. So people don't have to be forced out of their cars, but say, look, it's great. If I go and park my car at the local tram train station, I'm in the centre of Sheffield in a quarter of an hour with no hassle. And now I think making people's lives better, so people can see the developments coming and doing that, and growing the overall economy is a challenge I'd like to see. And then at the other level, making sure that the day-to-day business of councils can be done in a way that delivers good public services for people, and that does mean sorting out the pressures of adult social care, special education needs, which I think the government's just about hopefully to start doing, and of course the challenges of homelessness. For heaven's sake, let's spend some more money on social housing. The benefits of that are enormous. The economic and financial gains of doing it are enormous. So I'm with Rachel. Keep fighting, Rachel, for that, because we can't build 1.5 million homes in this parliament unless a lot of them are built by public sector bodies and housing associations to deliver social housing people can afford.
I think that's a great point on which to finish. And you've set out a challenging but nevertheless a progressive agenda for the government for the rest of the Parliament. As always, Clive, both for your hour today, I'm hugely appreciative, but I'm sure, like everyone else, we're hugely appreciative of all the work that you've done over the years and continue to do in order to look at how local government is currently working, but also how we can make it a much better thing in the future.
That's the objective, and hopefully I'm keeping going at that for the rest of this Parliament.
You are indeed. So thank you very much.